Hi guys, my name is Boiti and you're watching Joburg Today.
The last thing you would want to think of as a parent is your child becoming a victim of a predator. Most of us growing up can relate to the warning we were given back then. Don't talk to strangers. However, statistics indicate that most predators are people your children know quite well. So we decided to have an important discussion around this with a local clinical psychologist in Johannesburg. We hope this advice will benefit you as a parent or guardian. Renate, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here with us to talk about a very important topic, which is preparing your child to deal with predators. As a clinical psychologist at Wits University, you wrote an interesting article. Why is it important for parents to address with children at a young age on how to deal with predators?
So good morning. It's just to firstly acknowledge that I am aware that it's a very difficult conversation for parents to have with children, and even to think about having it, and it can raise a lot of panic and anxiety for parents. But it is completely possible to have the conversation with children in a way that doesn't alarm them and actually just establishes clear boundaries around them that makes them feel safe in the world. Yes. And we need to have the conversation because unfortunately our incidence of abuse of children is alarmingly high in South Africa and also globally. So it is a conversation we can't afford not to have.
Sure. I like what you just said. It's all about making a child feel safe in the world, which brings me to the next question. What would be the correct approach for parents to use without alarming their children?
Okay. So what I suggest is that you start incorporate it naturally as the child develops, so starting early on. So already from the age of 2 and sometimes even younger, children start naturally exploring their bodies, and it's around that age that boys discover their penis and girls discover their vagina, and it's like, oh, this feels nice when I touch here.
Yes.
So at that age, you already start integrating into your conversation in a completely normal way that yes, it feels nice, but it's important that you only touch yourself when you're in the safety of your home. Okay, so it's not something we do when we're outside the home. So that's the first boundary you put down. And then it's also really important to name it as a penis and a vagina. And the reason this is so important is because if your child is being interfered with or anyone's trying to touch them inappropriately, and they mention this to someone, and it might not be you, it might be someone else or a teacher or someone else who could be alerted to what's happening, and they use a different name, the person is not going to be alerted. So it's really important that we use the proper names. And then from the age of around 2 or so, when they are touching themselves and exploring themselves, and you say to them as well when in the bath, that yes, it feels really good, but you know what, that's private, which means that no one else is allowed to touch you. And you keep having this conversation, and usually by the age of 3 you can communicate to the child, because by then they can learn to wash their own bum and their own penis and vagina, and you communicate then that you know what, because it's private, only you are allowed to wash your penis or your vagina, only you are allowed to touch it, not even. And the reason why this is so important, because now it's an impenetrable boundary. Not even mom or dad or sister or brother or granny or grandpa. No one's allowed to touch it because it's private. And if anyone tries to touch you there, you need to tell me immediately. And then also to have the conversation with the child about what do you do in the event that someone touches you. Because this is the conversation we often don't have with our children. And say to them that if anyone tries to touch you, you immediately scream and shout, and you give them permission to fight back. So you say you bite, you kick, you hit, you do whatever you need to do, and you run away, and you immediately find me or dad or granny or grandpa or teacher and tell them.
How often should parents have this conversation with their kids?
So it's important to integrate it into part of your conversation that you come back to every now and then. So don't just have a once-off conversation and think it's done, because children need to have the importance of it. It's only through it being reinforced that they understand the importance of it, but also the constant giving of permission to the child that you are allowed to fight back. Because children are socialized to respect elders.
To be good little boys, good little girls.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to listen when spoken to and not to answer back.
And it's natural for children just to love people because they're not contaminated by the complexities of this world as yet.
And that's the tragedy. It's the innocence that's abused.
Yeah.
And so in giving them that permission that in these situations you're allowed to fight back and you're allowed to fight back against an adult, gives them the permission then to do it. Otherwise they are disarmed in the situation and they don't know what to do.
Sure. It's easy for us as adults to know our boundaries, but I suppose for children it has to be reinforced all the time.
All the time.
And I suppose, like you said, the approach is important. So it can be done in a loving, in a playful way, you know, just by the way, like it's nothing to be alarmed about.
Yes. Yes.
Is that important for a child to be taught in that manner?
It's very important.
As opposed to being scolded and reprimanded and warned?
Yes.
Because I think a lot of people, a lot of parents do that. They try to instill a fear in the kid so the child will act in that fear.
Yes.
Maybe to protect themselves or would not want to disappoint mommy or daddy.
Yes. Yes, and it's really important not to do it like that, because part of what perpetrators abuse is the fear that no one's going to believe you, or that your mommy or daddy or your granny is not going to love you anymore, and that you've
been bad.
You've been bad. So it's really important that it comes from a place of love, comes from a place of, part of the communication is that. And it's really important that I love you, I'll always love you, and if you tell me, I will believe you, and no one...
I'm on your side.
I'm on your side, and no adult's allowed to tell you a secret. You're not allowed to keep secrets.
See, that's
from
important.
Me, and I will believe you.
What about gifts? Because, you know, giving gifts, offering gifts to kids as well.
Yes, so that's part of the boundary. So you can see it's all about setting down firm, impenetrable boundaries which help the child to feel safe in the world. So there again, no one's allowed to give you sweets or gifts without asking me or asking whoever identified safe people are in the child's world. They have to ask us first, and then if we say yes, you can have it.
Are schools playing an important role here in educating kids around predators?
So schools do have drives, usually a week drive, in which they, or a day in which they have a conversation with children about it, and they'll have it every year. But similarly to the importance of it being done in a more continuous manner at home, you also need to do it more continually at school in terms of reminding children. So I think that's what schools could be doing more, but also having the specific conversation about what are the concrete steps that the child needs or can take should they find themselves in such a situation. Because schools tend to tell children, no one's allowed to touch you, and they tell them to go and tell teacher or tell your parents or tell a police officer. But what I think the conversation that's not happening is around what do you do in the event that you are in such a situation, and how do you fight back? How do you get away in that moment?
Sure.
Yeah.
So that is a very important conversation to have. You also mention or highlight in your article child kidnapping and trafficking, which is also a common occurrence in most societies today.
Unfortunately.
What kind of education is needed around that from the parent side?
So again, it's a horrific thing for parents to have to think about, but we need to think about it and have the conversation to help our children be safe in the world and protect their innocence. And again, it can be done in a way without alarming, and that you explain to your child that no one is allowed to pick you up, no one outside of our family or outside of the people we know, and we can name who are those people who are allowed to pick you up, because that's what happens. The kid gets picked up and they run away with them. And then to tell them, well, what do you do in such a situation? Again, giving them the concrete steps to follow and the permission again to fight back. Otherwise, they are just completely disarmed in the moment and in shock, and so they don't fight back. So to say to them that if anyone outside of your family picks you up, you need to shout immediately, "You are not my mommy," or "You are not my daddy." The reason being, not just shouting help, is because it can be then dismissed as you're having a tantrum. Oh, my child's just having a tantrum, or they're having a bad day, and you understand what it's like when your child's having a bad day. So to be very clear, because that's a very different message. You are not my mommy, you're not my daddy. And again, bite, kick, scream, hit and run away and find a security officer, a security guard, or a police officer. And when you're in malls, you can point out that, see, there's a security guard, there's a police officer. And just to explain that to them, and explain, because no one else is allowed to pick you up. They have to ask me first.
Sure. Are we talking about young children? But, you know, I think another part of the vulnerable population amongst the youth are teenagers. And that's a very rebellious time in their lives as well.
Yeah, it's a very rebellious time. So why it's important then, if you have the conversation from early on as well, that you have these boundaries that are firmly in place, so that they are aware of what is and isn't permissible. And yes, when you get into your teenage years, you are going to push those boundaries. That's what teenagehood is all about. And out of interest as well, the prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed, the part of the brain.
Yeah.
So they don't understand the consequences of behavior yet, and they are more impulsive during that time, which is why they push boundaries. But there again, to have clear conversations with your child about what are the parameters, what are the safety parameters that we need to ensure are in place to keep you safe and protected. So not just going off with people you don't know, because it's unfortunately not safe. And then you can have a more open conversation with your teenager about the dangers and about what risks there are and what risks there are to them. And let's think about it and how we can put safety procedures in place, such as designated drivers, making sure you go out with a specific group of friends, never leaving a drink unattended if they are going to have, older adolescents going to have a drink somewhere. But also, and this is also very important, and it links back to the younger children as well, is to make sure that they have memorized a number with an international dialing code. Because one of the things that perpetrators do with child kidnapping, and if they get them out of a country, is they will tell them that firstly they might say that if they come to pick them up, that your mommy or your daddy sent me to pick you up, so that's why the communication around no one's allowed to pick you up. And then also they sometimes say your mom's died or your dad's died or your parents have died, as a way of shocking them into not fighting. So it's very important to say as well that that's not true. If someone says that to you, and they memorize the number, so no matter where you are, you keep finding a phone and you call me. So even for our teenagers,
being a parent is a full hands-on responsibility. One should not assume that when your child reaches a certain age that they don't need this kind of protection or guidance any longer. So I would think it's a fair question to ask how involved a parent should be in the child's development until the brain is fully developed.
Very involved, very involved. They cannot think through the consequences of their behavior and regulate their emotions adequately enough until early adulthood. If they've had enough regulation of their emotions and input from you as a parent, and helping them think about their behavior and the consequences of their behavior, so they've had that, then by early adulthood, young adults are better able to do it, given that they've had that kind of parenting and
so they need a good thorough grounding.
They need a good thorough grounding.
And everyone might not be qualified to be a great parent, unfortunately, if they don't understand.
There's no such thing as a perfect parent, and I think this is so important, that I really have learned that most parents, by and large, do the best they can. They do their best they can, and they come into parenting with their own limitations and their own histories. And there's no such thing as being a perfect parent, but you can be a good enough parent and get it right more often than not.
And ask for help. Approach professionals like yourself, clinical psychologists, people that are properly qualified in the field of human development, perhaps, to guide them.
Yeah. Don't be scared of asking for help. Everyone benefits from another ear.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful having you here with us to talk about this very important topic. Thank you.
Pleasure.